With bad debt mounting, is Telecom the new steel? Good evening and welcome to this special show. I'm Lata Venkatesh. India's telecom companies are standing on a mountain of debt. Revenues and margins have taken a hit due to intense competition, predatory pricing, while their loans are rising due to the high cost of spectrum. Is there a way out? We will discuss this with some of the top experts of the sector over the next 30 minutes. But first, let me bring in Prashant Nair, my co-anchor, who is going to explain how big the problem at hand is. Prashant.
Let's look at the big numbers straight away, Lata, and I think that gives us an overall sense. So we can look at individual companies, but what I've done for the purpose of giving us a snapshot view is added up all the numbers together here. So just the big, broad numbers, right? What we are concerned about is the debt at the industry level, which is the telecom industry level. And the total debt, the net debt stands at about 4.25 lakh crores for the existing telecom players. So what we've done is we've only taken the India debt for telecom companies. I mean, in the case of Bharti, which is 1 lakh crore plus debt, about $4 billion worth of debt, which is 25,000 crores, is because of Africa. We've excluded that. So excluding that, you add up Bharti, Idea, Vodafone, the smaller players, it adds up to 4.25 lakh crores. The industry operating profit, the EBITDA, stands at 55,000 crores. Let's just go back to that first plate, please. 4.25 lakh crores in debt, industry EBITDA 55,000 crores, interest outgo, assuming that the average cost of borrowing is about 8%, it should be round about there, 20 basis points here or there, but assuming 8%, the annual interest outgo stands at 34,000 crores or so. So industry is making 55,000 crores in operating profits, outgo is 34,000 crores, interest cover is 1.6, debt to EBITDA is 7.7 times. There is a significant gap between 55,000 and 34,000. So you would imagine that this is not really a dire situation. But the fact remains that most of what the industry is generating is going towards interest payments. And there is so much more in terms of capex, spectrum payments, etc., which the industry needs money for, which it does not find because of these high numbers. Let's move on. Where is the pain? And I think this is a very, very relevant piece of information. The top three telecom players, Bharti, Idea, Vodafone, have 90% share of the market, 90% share of operating profits. Their debt share as a percentage, industry share, is 46%. The bottom rung, I mean, everybody excluding the top three, make only 10% of industry profits, operating profits, but have 54% of the debt share, right? Here, one more classification is if you exclude Jio. Jio has 1,10,000 crores in debt, but it's backed by a company which is financially super strong. If you exclude that 1,10,000 crore, the EBITDA share remains 10%, but the debt share drops to 30%. So the point I'm making is Jio does kind of skew the numbers a little bit, but it's clear, very clear, that the problem is here. I mean, not at the top three. The top three players are okay, but beyond the top three, there is a lot of trouble. Back to you.
Point taken, Prashant. While you make your way from the plasma screen to your anchor chair, let me use that time to introduce our guests. So we are going to analyze this story with Nitin Soni, who is the analyst on telecom from Fitch Ratings, former chairman of Tribe, Pradeep Baijal, and Rajan Mathew, Director General, COAI. In a bit, we're going to be joined by Rajeev Chandrasekhar as well, who was once operating a telecom company and now also making policy, as it were. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Well, the reason why, although only 30% of the debt is with people who have only 10% of the market share, is a national problem, is because all this debt is owned by public sector banks or even private sector banks for that matter, and the spillover impact makes it a national problem, and hence the question whether government also has to chip in with some kind of policy help. Mr. Baijal, first that question to you, sir. Is government to interfere, or is this just predatory pricing and therefore, let the market kill somebody and sense emerge?
You see, this happens all over the world.
Yes.
That the telecom operators, when they start in a country, they are under severe financial pressure. The additional problem in India was that there were far too many players. No country can afford 4 to 5 players. Now, for some reasons, the players became much too many. When that happened, then everyone's margins were under pressure and people were going in for very low prices. Also, But now the number of operators have reduced, there have been more mergers. One of the solutions is that there has to be more mergers so that your poor small companies do not remain. Because I don't think that the government should bail out the companies if there are far too many companies. They should have seen their business case when they entered the telecom sector. Everyone had told them that 4 to 5 is the maximum that the sector can afford.
Well, let me get Mr. Rajan Matthew in as well. Rajan, what's your sense? Is this all because there has been too much of too many players and predatory pricing? Or, you know, can the government be a little kinder in terms of revenue share or in terms of interconnect rules? Is the government being too strict to the detriment of the industry?
So, Lata, clearly, thank you again. The reason we are looking to the government is because, of course, the government is the licensor and we participate as licensees. A full 30% or more of every rupee of top-line revenue goes back to the government. So clearly it is in the interest of the government to also address this issue. A good 40 to 50% of the debt is also probably held by the government as a result of payments due to the government from the recent auction processes. So it's very much in the interest of the government. The revenue that goes to them by license fees and spectrum that comes off of our revenue is also going back to them at about close to 11 to 14 to 15%. So again, it's in the interest of the government to address the issue of the financial health of the industry. And that's why we're asking for that. Of course, there are issues, as Mr. Baijal pointed out, vis-a-vis too many players that impacted the revenue stream, that sort of drove the tariffs down. Yes, it still continues to happen. But the larger picture is clearly one where the government needs to step in because of the government's stake in the revenue stream of this industry.
Mr. Baijal, just to sort of stress on one point, which is spectrum. Over the last many years, the government squeezed the availability or lack of availability, as they put it, of spectrum to extract the maximum top dollar, which many thought was not correct. It was almost artificially created scarcity of spectrum. That now has been reversed, right? When that was a very large source of borrowing for telecom companies. Although, I mean, you know, you had moratoriums, etc. You had to pay it over a long period of time. But still, it was a large source of stress for telcos.
Can I answer that? You see, earlier, there was a spectrum squeeze. I remember with all the telecom operators, the total spectrum that had been given was about 130 megahertz. In the last 1 year, this 130 has become 200. Now, in all countries in the world, you can give about 300 to 350 megahertz. It depends on how much you can refarm, etc., vis-a-vis the other players. Now, you've already gone from 130 to 200. One of the solutions is that this 200 should go to 300. When that happens, the price of spectrum will automatically come down because whoever does the valuation of a spectrum looks at the demand and supply. So if more spectrum is put in the market, the price will surely come down.
Yeah.
And there, the government should not insist on a high income. Because after all, the entire telecom sector, what has happened in the past, that because of the growth in telecom, the GDP has gone up. Because of the growth in telecom, so many positive things have happened. So the price of a spectrum should not be very high. Now, you can't control the price if there is an auction.
Yep.
However, if there is an auction, if you make good chunks of spectrum available, if you allow all kinds of sharing, etc., so that the spectrum is used more, then the price will not be very high. Currently, I said that about 200 megahertz has been distributed to the operators. I think the number should be 300, because if you have a higher number, then the number of requirement of towers goes down, the number of call drops goes down, and it does a lot of good to the telecom sector. So I think more spectrum should definitely be made available, and there are various methods to keep the price down despite an auction, and those methods should be used.
Okay. We have Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekharan also joining us. Mr. Chandrasekharan, you have, of course, multifaceted roles. You have run a company, a telecom company, and now you're a lawmaker as well. You are on the NPA committee as well, or the parliamentary committee that is the finance committee that looks into NPAs. What's your sense, first of all, the possibility of higher spectrum and maybe easier sharing rules is what the industry could want, but should the government step in at all or let the market, take its due course?
No, I think, look, Lata, I think we must understand that the sector is not just consisting of two stakeholders, that is the companies and the government. There is an independent telecom regulator, and then there are consumers. And I think if there is this argument that is being put out that the telecom sector is in distress or whatever the newest argument is, it is for the regulator to intervene, because the mandate of the regulator under the TIA Act is to make sure that both there is orderly growth of the sector as well as consumers are benefited. Now, so I have not seen any evidence, excepting for the usual industry lobby saying, we are in trouble, we need help, we need more spectrum. This connection between more spectrum and drop calls, or connection between more spectrum and call quality is an erroneous connection, and it is an argument that has been made and defeated on multiple occasions.
No, Mr. Chandrasekhar,
yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, that argument is there about spectrum quantity and call quality. But this is a question we are raising as just citizens. There is, for instance, one company, Telecom, has 9 times debt to its market cap. Likewise, even Idea, another player with more spectrum and more, almost 42% now of the market after the merger with Voda, even that has about 2 times debt to its market cap. The point is, this is public sector debt. Either as taxpayer or as depositor or as investor, this may become a public problem. So should the government intervene?
No, I mean, look, I think that is the argument for all bad loans. I mean, there have been, as you are making, the case that you are making is that banks have lent recklessly, or that the amount of debt that a bank or a consortium of banks has allowed a particular entity to accumulate is disproportionate. Now, why the taxpayer should come out and bail out a bank that has practiced bad lending practices, or why the government should bail out a telecom company that has now burdened itself with a lot of debt when it can go raise equity, or it has not shown evidence that it cannot raise equity.
Yeah.
I fail to understand. So
no, sir, I take your point. I take your point that there will be several people who will have to be blamed for this. But why I am narrowing it down is that at the moment there could be a too big to fail syndrome. Whether we like it or not, if a 45,000 crore debt were to turn bad, several banks will have to be capitalized. Sooner or later, there will be a bill. I'm just saying that, therefore, like the government intervened in steel by trying to help, setting up an MIP. You could accuse even over there that probably there was gold plating of some steel companies. But nevertheless, the problem would have been a public problem. So we are asking this question: should the government intervene in some fashion, and what could that fashion be?
Let's just carve out this problem. I accept your contention that there is a looming problem in this sector, as is many other sectors, because of the disproportionate amount of debt that has been put on the balance sheets of these companies. So, point accepted. Now, the only question left is, when we are moving to a regime of insolvency, and we are moving to a regime where promoters are going to be changed to cure the distress of debt, or to cure the NPA, when you talk about government intervention, should the government intervention be a bailout, or should the government intervention be should be of a nature that allows these enterprises to move to sustained viability without these promoters? So I think, so I'm not disputing your contention, but I'm completely of the opinion that there cannot be any shortcut band-aid solution that involve public money and public assets at this stage. because that is talking about moral hazard of a kind that will cut across all other sectors.
Okay. Mr. Chandrasekhar.
Government must...
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. So just to put it another way, leaving the direct intervention at this stage aside, which you're against, would you agree that the government has been, not this government, but I mean over the last many years, has been kind of myopic with the sector, as Mr. Baijal was also making the point? The multiplier effects from the telecom sector were many, the multiplier effect on growth, etc. But the sector was squeezed, via spectrum, via revenue share, etc., etc. Now, does the government need to take its foot off the pedal there in some way?
No, look, if you're making an argument that government should start dispersing subsidized spectrum, there will be a serious outcry from a lot of people who consider this a public asset and say that monetizing a public asset should be to the benefit of the larger public at large. I mean, whether it's a coal mine or spectrum or a gold mine or land, the pendulum has swung away from over the last decade to giveaways to now where public want real value of that public asset realized. Now, in the event that the real value is not realized because there is an argument that public interest is served, then that public interest has to be quantified.
Yep.
Now, the public interest in this case could be that you will then keep rates low and you will bring in government and the regulator into rate administration, tariff administration, which again the industry doesn't want.
But
there is no free lunch.
Absolutely. But at the same
point, line here is there is no free lunch.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Chandrasekhar. It's a very interesting topic, and we want to take this discussion forward. Nitin Soni of Fitch Ratings is also with us. So I request all our panelists to stay with us. We will take a very quick break, and we are right back, and we take this discussion forward. Stay with us.